I wondered, is he there? Is he there? What's the
I'm
delay?
here.
Oh, he's there, but me, I'm here. We're both here.
You're,
The gang's all
yeah.
here. First up, this is good to have Uncle Gordy on to tell us some more geopolitical campfire stories. There have never been more stories to tell. This is ridiculous what's going on. I've never seen anything like it. Now, well, the latest I saw was that Trump, in his somewhat spontaneous personality, said, yes, I'll meet with Kim in North Korea. And then the White House kind of said, well, wait a minute. We kind of threw our advantage away here. We've got to get something out of this. So they backed up, and then they laid some conditions down. And then they promptly said that we're not going to give any more conditions. That's all we're going to do. Like they're being really cool. Okay, here we are. Since Trump has agreed to the meeting, some are calling it a summit, with Kim Jong-un, North Korea has been quiet. They haven't said much of anything. In fact, they've said officially nothing. So it looks like the chessboard still has lots of pieces on it, Gordy.
Well, you know, there are a few obvious things we look at that Kim and Trump are pretty much brothers under the skin, but it's really not necessarily the case. I was on the phone with Syria a little while ago, and this is one of those spatial jumps here. But there's an area just outside the city of Damascus called East Ghouta. It's a suburb.
Yes.
And inside East Ghouta, there was an area held by rebels. Now, the broad explanation of what rebels are. In 2013, 2014, the U.S. began pouring money into potentially dissident members of the Syrian army, people who didn't get along well with the Assad family, or people who
did that in Iraq too, didn't they?
Yeah, people who wanted to take cash and convinced them that the U.S. was going to support them, and there was going to be a government overthrown. The U.S. had just overthrown a bunch of governments, and this one was going to fall into line. And if you wanted to be at the feet at the trough, you know, the U.S. was going to have Assad thrown out in a color revolution. Well, by the middle of 2014, the U.S. had found that the message of these milquetoast, spineless, basically, military leaders and whiny politicians and whatever, that it wasn't attractive enough for the U.S. and its backers. And the U.S. backers, of course, were Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the crime networks that that make up the U.S. government. And you know, what I want to say that the primary business of the U.S. government is as enforcers for international banking and the drug cartels. That is why America exists. It's why we have a military. It's what our aircraft carriers do. We are debt collectors for criminal organizations. You know, as stated in 1933 by Marine General Smedley Butler. I was a gangster for Wall Street. Well, as time goes on, now within East Ghouta, which was in pretty much firing distance of anywhere in Damascus.
Damascus, yeah, it's a suburb.
Yeah. So while I would sit there in a hotel in Damascus or attend press briefings and being taken to see, you know, the secret prisons and whatever during my public relations visits there, you could sit in the hotel and these barrel bomb things they fired out of these huge mortars would land and there'd be huge explosions. I mean, just like London in 1941 during the Blitz, all around the city.
Stiff upper lip, you know, and all that, Gordon.
Yeah, without Winston Churchill and the cigar, you know. Well, today, East Ghouta is about 90% smaller, cut in half, and that, you know, the original freedom-loving, paid-off, pro-American mercenary bought idiots that are all dead. The U.S.
Yes.
threw in its lot with Al-Qaeda and ISIS instead, because the Saudis kind of have a love affair with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And if you go into the media, you're finding now that the poor ISIS beheaders and the poor Al Qaeda folks who supposedly blew up the World Trade Center are now, instead of the vicious thugs they used to be, it appears they're all small children or old women being murdered by the Syrian army. This is a propaganda war. And in understanding the propaganda war, the key thing to understand today is you look at Trump and his primary enemy, CNN. And we go back to, and Jeff and I are always going to be saying some of the same stuff because the same stuff's pretty much always true. If it was true 100 years ago, it'll be true today. Vladimir Lenin, if you want to control the opposition, be the opposition. So the Trump-hating opposition is CNN, owned by Trump's best friends.
Okay, draw the loop here. Draw the loop from Trump to Israel to CNN to Trump. And then you get the loop?
Yeah.
Okay.
That the fake news, the man calling the fake news, is the man the fake news made. The fake news made Trump. It builds Trump. And what's critical is that all of the reporting about Trump and his, I screwed this one and I did that to that one. Well, it's all derailing the real story about Trump, which is Jared Kushner running around selling the services of the U.S. military, our missiles. As
fast as he can.
He's peddling the lives of our military people to petty dictators, thugs, and gangsters around the world. You want to be protected by the United States? You want a SEAL team to go out and kill your business partner?
It's racketeering,
we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Racketeering. And so if you're special forces, Marine Force reconnaissance, if you're on an aircraft carrier, you're nothing more than an errand boy for the Khazarian mafia. Kushner's selling your services, and while you're sitting in that submarine or you're jumping off the back of that helicopter in the dark in the middle of the night, that bad guy you're killing is somebody who didn't pay their protection this month.
You've got it distilled right down to the bare essentials. That's amazing. You've just done it. That's about the best analysis since Smedley Butler.
And as someone who is, by nature, I am pro-military. I'm one of those people.
Oh, sure.
Well, if we take the clock back 50 years ago, I was a Marine in South Vietnam collecting for the banks myself. Only I knew it then. For those who were really in Vietnam, we all knew exactly what was going on. It was apparent.
Soldiers. They were bank tellers. You were a bank teller, Gordy. Come on.
I was a bank teller working for grocery clerks, as Colonel Kurtz would have put it.
Oh, God. How sad to laugh at it. You got to, though, at this point. Just
anybody stupid enough, and I mean stupid enough, to take anything these morons from West Point, Annapolis, or the Air Force Academy, we call the service academies the Viper Academies. I was talking to I was out in an appliance store today trying to hustle Wolf Corporation out of a 48-inch range, actually. Oh. And ran into an old CIA special ops guy. And
that's a $10,000 range.
It's a $10,000 range. They want $17,000 for is the problem.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. And and I'm thinking maybe I could get a used one, for $7,000-8,000 and fix it up.
Absolutely. But, Craigslist.
Yeah.
You can't lose.
Yeah. That's exactly right. But we were going over some of these issues today. The issues being the U.S. military, our intelligence services, who we are, who Homeland Security is. Homeland Security exists to provide surveillance and control of the United States on behalf of us. Homeland Security is an entirely Israeli-run organization that sits over the top of 17 intelligence agencies. Now, I've got friends in the FBI and other organizations. And what I mean by friends in the FBI, I'm an ex-cop from forever ago. I didn't care for the job. It was, I just gotten a master's degree. I had a kid on the way, and I had two job choices, because there wasn't any university that was going to hire me to teach history at the time, not pay anything. So I could either be a tree trimmer or a state trooper. And it took 2 days for me. Oh, it's true. And I just remember sitting through the 6 weeks of police academy, mostly watching videotapes. You had to be able to run.
Excuse me. Did you have your sense of humor back then? To a substantial degree. You never would have made a good cop. You would have been too damn nice. There's nice Officer Bobby. Look, there he is. No.
Well, we used to run two to a car then. I remember it was Christmas Eve, 1977. My partner was an Army airborne guy, and since his name will never be spoken anymore, then it was Doug Britton, amateur boxer, and the only guy I could work with because I was I didn't get along well with rednecks, and big and mean enough to make my opinion stick. But Doug and I got along fine, and we used to start every shift out of Lansing. We'd drive down to the little town of Onondaga, where there was a gas well that burned off methane. Yeah. And we'd park our cruiser down there and get buzzed, and then kind of drift around in the car all night, basically. That's a true story.
That's called good cop, good cop.
Yeah. Well, buzzed cop. Yeah. I remember it was Christmas Eve, 1977. Doug dropped me off at my place just south of MSU's campus in Mason, Michigan. I ran upstairs, got a couple of bottles of Great Western champagne, which, the $5 a bottle shit. I had a case of it sitting there. And next morning, we were both working Christmas Day.
Wow.
He'd pick me up and usually drive me in. Never showed up, so I went in late for roll call. And Doug had shot himself. He was a Vietnam veteran. Just lost a son to crib death, and his wife, who I didn't care much for, had left. Mm-hmm. And that was the last time I'd ever worked with anyone I could stand. There wasn't anyone else I could deal with. Mm-hmm. Although,
well, he clearly got it. He understood, and just had enough. Okay.
I don't generally hate cops. Of course, one of these. I'm white. I'm a 1%er.
You're gonna have to change that.
I live in the good neighborhood. I drive the good car and whatever, and and
you have an elevator, for God's sake.
I've got an elevator. Actually, this since we're doing this. Wait a minute. Let's see if I push the button on it. Oh, if somebody on another floor has the door open on the elevator, you can't use the elevator. That's the home elevator thing. But there are days. I mean, you're moving furniture or dragging groceries or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you
or trapping gophers in the summer,
the issue is the larger homes they build nowadays. The monster pieces of I call it wagaleums is the term the Canadians call it, because being the racist people they are. Yeah.
Wagaleums. That's good.
Well, when you have ceilings that are 15, 16 feet high. I have a 3-story house. It's 21 steps to the next floor.
I know.
By the time I've done that 5 or 6 times a day with one, totally destroyed knee, it's a long day. But
that's what the elevator's for.
Yeah, and laundry and whatever. But it's kind of cool, and it's a GE. God only knows. It's not it's a GE hotel elevator, and sitting in the middle of the kitchen.
It's a big industrial strength elevator.
Yeah. I mean, I put pieces of furniture in it and whatever. It's in a kitchen that has no room for a refrigerator. I'm going to have to go into the butler's pantry, rip out a pot rack.
I saw that in the pictures. I remember now.
Yeah,
It was a little
and
cramped over there in that one area.
there's no refrigerator. So I'll have a 48-inch stove and 3 ovens, and there's no refrigerator anywhere, which is
You're
just
going to
going
start raising cattle for those ovens pretty soon.
yeah. And I've got a trout pond, and it's flooding here, so I've got a trout pond that's now covering, I don't know, it's probably 400 feet across now.
There's so much water there that trout are drowning. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
It's pretty much that. But the message we have, and it's a real message to people in the military, and it's always been this case. You know, we get suckered into this stuff where you're landed in the middle of nowhere. You're with a small unit. If you're a real combat, that many are, but you know, I'm talking to guys out there who know what I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
Because so many people, not only did you go to Afghanistan and to Iraq, but you went over and over and over again. Well, Vietnam, we didn't ride around in cars. We didn't have a PlayStation. We made $100 a month, and we ate C rations, and we lived on about 800 calories a day. So it was a little different thing.
Lean
And the getting shot,
mean.
and the getting shot at happened maybe 10 times as much. So it's, you know, that kind of stuff. So to some extent, it's not equivalent, except that if you did 20 minutes in a real firefight with real bad guys, whether it was World War I or the Civil War or whatever, it's all the same thing. And anybody that's been there that's known that. Anyone else, what you tell yourself is that you fight to defend your buddies, those with you.
Yeah.
But too much nowadays, I find this need to save democracy and.
Oh, the space cadets. I don't
see it. If you don't know there's no democracy here, I can give you the short talk, and we go through this over and over again with Jeff. But if I'd like to think I got some new listeners out there. We had a democracy, you know, and this democracy, of course, were rich planters and others, you know, Masons, elites that threw the British out, you know, and rightly so. I mean, why the hell not? And set about an attempt to create a new form of government. Well, these were the founding fathers, and they're a pretty interesting group of people, Franklin and gang, who weren't the founding fathers, really. Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists and those around them were more bankers and speculators. And they built a central government that was a scam. And the scam document that certified servitude for the American people was called the Constitution. Those of you who like the sound and went to class and bought the Kool-Aid. Well, yeah. What I'd like to tell you here is the Constitution talks about equal protection. Yet why does Wyoming have 2 senators with 200,000 people when California has 2 senators with 51 million people? Say, oops. Or if you read the real Constitution, they didn't start electing senators, which that's advice and consent. Nothing's passed or done without the Senate. Until 1911, the Senate was picked. Who was it picked by? I don't know. They forgot to mention. Okay.
Well, guess what happened in 1913, 2 years later,
yeah,
right?
We'll get to that one.
Yeah.
The Constitution was written with Congress, as Jeff just pointed out here, surreptitiously. Only Congress could coin money. Well, in 1913, the heroic former head of, was it Cornell or Yale or whatever, skull and bones guy named Woodrow Wilson,
Woody,
with the help of an agent of darkness named Max Warburg, created what was called the Federal Reserve Act. Now, who is the Federal Reserve? Well, there's one name behind the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a series of banks. All of those banks are controlled by the Rothschild family. The Rothschild family is known for one thing: engineering wars in Europe for profit. So in 1913, the Rothschild family suddenly, in direct contravention to the Constitution of the United States and with the aid of Woodrow Wilson, set up a scheme where the U.S. borrowed money from itself and paid interest to the Rothschild family on it for some reason.
Unbelievable.
It's a scam. The Federal Reserve,
probably the greatest scam in our time. I can't think of a.
And 2 years later, we found ourselves in a world war against the Germans. Now, what did the Germans do wrong? Did they rape Belgium? Did they kill babies? No. The Germans refused to accept, wait for it, a Rothschild-owned central bank. That's why we went after them. Did Germany in World War I ever do anything wrong? The vicious Hun? Not hardly. Bismarck set up a democracy in Germany. They had free education. They had free health care. They had 100% employment. They had a 40-hour work week.
They were walking away from the British Empire, okay? They were leaving them in the soup.
And not only that, you got a country that actually made pure beer. Well, God only knows. Yeah. And edible sausage. While in this country, well, if we went back to 1913, what did we have? Beer could be 50% water, 30% horse piss. Milk from the Carnation and Borden companies was 50% chalk water.
Was it really? Was it that bad? See, that's before 50%. The FDA, of course.
Yeah. Well, the FDA, Mr.
FDA
Trump's
is worse, but in their own way.
He's getting rid of the FDA for us now, and we'll be back to the chalk water world.
Wow.
But anything and everything you would buy was adulterated. Medicines were all a combination of opium and
cocaine,
arsenic,
heroin,
cocaine.
Yeah, you name it. It was all there.
That's
fascinating. That beer was that bad. Hires root beer. That came out later, I guess. One would think that would have been at least reasonable.
That's a Detroit thing, Hires root beer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Hires root beer, Verner's ginger ale, which the joke, of course, is that Verner's was carbonated battery acid.
Yeah, I couldn't. That is the worst stuff. Hires, though, is pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, Germany had pure food. Sausage was made out of real meat. Everything was accountable.
Germany was the most advanced nation on the face of the earth. Okay, that's the truth.
Philosophically, scientifically, in 1908, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin, headed by Albert Einstein, by the way, who was. And if you've ever heard from the song Kaiser Bill's Batman, a Batman is the guy that polishes your shoes, by the way. The Kaiser Bill's Batman was Albert Einstein. The Kaiser bought him a nice home up in Potsdam, got him a sailboat, bought him a girlfriend too, for that matter. Einstein went through the ladies pretty much like Mr. Trump claims he does.
Oh, just ask Marilyn Monroe's ghost. Was that before or after Einstein worked in the patent office where he got so much inspiration?
He was worked in the Swiss patent office, and the discussion here with probably somebody smarter than me would be the issues of the original patent of relativity, and then the proofs for general relativity in 1908, and whether or not Einstein solved unified field theory, which oversimplified when looking at the dynamics of our solar system, where we either talk of field theory and curved space, then how does magnetism relate to field theory? If magnetic forces can operate much the same as gravitational forces can, is there a connection, a particle connection between light particles, magnetic attraction, and the actual gravitational fields? Can they be expressed physically within an equation that interrelates? And that's unified field theory, and explained by somebody with a third grade education in physics. But
they study physics in the third grade where you went?
Yeah, I went to an advanced country
school. Very, very advanced, yeah.
Yeah. But back to our theme here of the Kool-Aid.
How about the Einstein, the patent officer? Let me ask all of you to think about this. Here's this bright young man. He was bright. He gets a job in the Swiss patent office. Some of the greatest things in the world go into the Swiss patent office. Does Albert Einstein look away from these patents and forget what he saw?
No.
Or does he remember them?
Oh, we got a closing line on this one here. Something you may not know, and you may think I'm making up, but in 1908 at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, Albert Einstein began designing the first atomic bomb.
That's a good.
All of the necessary equations to create a U-235 gun type weapon.
Yeah, they're already there. Interesting.
We're in place with Einstein and Heisenberg in 1908.
Wow.
And that by the end of World War I, the Germans were close to having a nuclear weapon with nothing the size of the Manhattan Project behind it.
They were the world's intellectual, scientific elite, among other things. The Germans. That's why Churchill, in his biography, in one of his few lucid moments of honesty, said, World War II had nothing to do with National Socialism or Adolf Hitler. It was a war designed to destroy Germany and its people once and for all. That's what he said. He wrote it.
It's just one of the funny things I'm finding here, and as an American, but I've lived, as with many of us, we've moved. I've lived in California and Florida and Texas, and I've lived outside the U.S. for about a third of the last 25 years. In the early 80s, Africa, Central America, a lot of time in the Middle East. But here in the U.S., we don't realize to what degree we are regionalized like Europe is. And I spent part of the year for the past 18, 19 years. I'm in Germany, from 3 to 6 months, basically.
Right.
And I've got one company I work for keeps a closet-sized apartment for me in what we call the City of London, just off what's really Fleet Street. I'm about for anybody who wants to follow me around.
The Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
Yeah, I'm about 4 blocks from St. Paul's Cathedral, or within my local's the Punch and Judy for any of you guys in London. But in Germany, I live in a small town in Germany on the Mosel River. We do about 30,000 bottles of wine a year, almost all Riesling, a little bit of spot.
Business is good. Good.
That's not a lot. A little bit of Spätburgunder, which is really Pinot Noir. That's in Germany doesn't do so well. Getting better with global warming is giving us better Pinot Noir. But
speaking of Einstein, don't forget, right? Plagiarize. Let no one else's work evade your eyes. And don't forget that.
Einstein was a funny guy.
He was a triumph of marketing. He was way ahead of the curve. They marketed his image, his persona. It was kind of like showbiz, okay?
And they used Einstein to sell the idea of the Jewish state. And
he was a poster boy. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the things we get into repeating ourselves there, but
it's all right. It's the truth.
We have been paying for 65 years. God only knows everybody deserves a homeland, and I always thought it was Brooklyn and Oak Park, Michigan, and the North Shore of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fine enough homeland for anybody. Who the hell want to live in the Middle East with a bunch of transplanted Russians who that's the issue getting at Jeff, and one that I get burnout on to some extent. But with Kushner sitting next to Trump, this has been it. Whatever Trump may or may not have been, the son-in-law Kushner, the poisonous little toad, and his white witch wife.
Princess.
Was it? Yeah, the little princess of repaired nose and augmented breasts and fixed up little hair and out there.
Don't forget their skyscraper with the wonderful address of 666. All true.
Did you know that the CIA actually has its second largest facility in a New York skyscraper with the address 666 on it?
Gosh, what a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean literally. For some reason, I remember the first time going in there on a Boy Scout camping trip, because that's the Boy Scout, group I belong to. And I was thinking, is this a coincidence or were they thinking of something, Uh-huh. Oh, what Jeff and I are try to do periodically, we talk about this sometimes. We can sound like whiny old ladies if we can doom and gloom people. I listened to Trump this last week, for instance, and his talk about how he was going to stop that endless flow of mostly assembled Ford pickup trucks and Whirlpool washers and dryers that are crossing over the border from Mexico.
Right.
But then he talked about aluminum, and I sat on the worked in banking, so I sat on the aluminum desk with Rio Tinto for some time. I know as much about aluminum trading, bauxite, aluminum ingots as about anybody on earth. I did this for some time. Of course, there isn't that much to know, other than the fact the aluminum industry is a nasty one. If you wanted to learn about aluminum, you'd think about the country of Ghana, one of the largest producers of bauxite. In 1957, a guy named Kwame Nkrumah took over as president of Ghana. A little background in socialism, a little background in not liking the British boot on his neck. His idea was to take Ghana, the most advanced nation in Africa, with tremendous hydroelectric potential from Lake Volta, endless. Right. And its hydroelectric power is what is needed to produce aluminum. And the largest bauxite, largest and highest quality bauxite reserves in the world. And his idea was to build a dam, harness the river that fed Lake Volta, and begin producing aluminum out of their natural bauxite. That, however, the idea of that dam, of the hydroelectric power, as is so often the case, were we to look at Iran in 1953 or other nation after other nation, people who wanted to sell their own bananas and coffee and not through the U.S. consortium and ended up with their government overthrown. Nkrumah was pushed out, gotten rid of, and killed, along with 4 consecutive governments in Ghana. And Ghana continued and continued and continued, as they do to this day. And I'm an advisor to the government and sit on the board of the Defense Industries Holding Company of Ghana and take an active role in this. But my idea is pretty much that it's time. They were ready to industrialize. Why is Africa, the Africa you see with the starving little kids with the maggots in around their nose and eyes? Who did that? Was it all those horribly corrupt African leaders? Or was it the Rothschild family that owns the Federal Reserve and controls Rio Tinto and controls the bauxite and controls Great
all
Britain
the central
through City of
banking
London?
systems except for 3 left. 1,
That's right.
Cuba. 2, Iran. 3, North Korea. The only 3 that are outside the hegemony of the Rothschilds. That's it.
And they are, of course, under eternal sanctions from the Rothschild owned and operated United States of America.
Utterly illegal, not unconstitutional. They're illegal. on the face of the
So
earth.
what I tell you, I've got people out there who served. I certainly did. I'm a decorated, God only knows, I'm a decorated combat vet. You know, what does that mean? I mean, it means I was a gangster for Wall Street, that I lost most of my friends who were killed early on for no reason, while people like, and it's not just Trump. When you look at Congress, we call them the oh gosh, what is that term now? Chicken hawks. It's pretty much the case. People like Dick Cheney, who had something else to do when it was time. That was just not the right war for any of these guys, the Vietnam War or anything else. But no, they invented a bad guy. The press, the controlled press, and it has always been the controlled fake news forever. It has never not been controlled.
Nope.
The United States has been controlled, owned, and operated by the Rothschild family since 1787.
Wow.
Any wars the U.S. took part in were all simply, and this is war. Why are there always wars? Because war is business. Doesn't matter who's fighting, as long as somebody's dying, as long as guns are sold, and as long as nations go into debt and borrow money from Rothschild banks.
That's right.
So there will always be wars, because war is the business that feeds the Rothschild family. And the Rothschild family controls planet Earth with a few exceptions. And those exceptions, if you look at any nation that's targeted by the United States, those are the nations that stood up to the Rothschilds. And who are the Rothschilds? We can go into conspiracy theory, but there are friends.
What was done to Germany for daring to have lost World War I? What happened to Germany in the 20s? For example.
Well, Germany was saddled with reparations, an endless amount of money. Every machine tool in Germany and every factory was stolen. Everything was closed down. And then their currency, their banking system, was utterly and absolutely collapsed.
Reparations beyond measure. The Bolsheviks were sent in en masse from the east, from Russia, to try to flood Germany into submission, to take it over and turn it into a communist state. That happened in the 20s. Horrible debauchery, the worst.
And at the same time, to a certain extent, the Bolsheviks found a feeding ground in France. They found a feeding ground in Italy. They found a feeding ground in Hungary. And then specific states were created under the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 that were playgrounds for the Bolsheviks. Among those was the state of Poland, cut out of Russia and Germany. Poland had existed as a dream. Hell, at one time, Lithuania was the size of the United States.
Was Lithuania that big? That's wild. I didn't know that.
For about 75 years, Lithuania was the size of Ukraine at one point. And Poland actually existed. The point being is that in 1919 in Paris, under the guise of the International Banking Consortium, the world was carved up in such a way as to guarantee there would be nations, people, and religions at each other's throat for the next 2 centuries. Wars were planned and engineered that we're still fighting. At the end of World War II, the reason the State of Israel was created was so that the wars that we're seeing today would go on and on and on. They went into Africa, cut nations up based on not just arbitrary and careless rules, but specifically to guarantee that no feasible government would survive, that no nation would have iron ore, coal, and agriculture, that no nation would be able to develop hydroelectric power and have the resources capable of industrializing. So they carved up Africa so that no single nation would be able to develop, whatever have the resources, transportation, or the population base required to modernize. They guaranteed that Africa would stay in the Bronze Age for centuries, and we've certainly seen it done. We saw the same thing in 1947 through 49 when they split South Asia into India and Pakistan, and left 130 to 150 million Muslims inside India as a hated minority. And then in what was then West Pakistan, left a majority population under the rule of a 6% Punjabi minority, while you had an East Pakistan made of Bengalis, which eventually in the late 1960s, India seems to just erased and turned into the eternally poverty-stricken state we know of as Bangladesh. We watched French Indochina, and I had some experience there, a lifetime of experience I was glad to survive. But we watched French Indochina carved up. Then remember how that happened. 1947, the U.S. decided that the Soviet Union had to be surrounded and that we were likely to lose China.
Geez, we're still trying to surround Russia, aren't we?
And the only way we could save Southeast Asia was by sending the French. The French were not such good allies during World War II, frankly. But we were going to send them back into Vietnam, where they were going to create a bastion of colonial strength and protect Southeast Asia from communism. By 1954, the French army sat surrounded at Dien Bien Phu, and Dwight Eisenhower said, "We'll let them die on the vine because America is going to move into Vietnam." One of the, those people who are unfamiliar with history or who went to the wrong school, the roots of the Vietnam War began when an American named Wesley Fishel, an assistant just after the fall of Japan. He was on the staff of General MacArthur. Introduced a young Catholic from Southeast Asia named Diem to General MacArthur and said, "This man, this young devout Catholic, is going to be the future of Vietnam, and he is going to walk American power into Southeast Asia." And Diem, with the help of Wesley Fishel and later an organization run through USAID and what was called MSUG, the Michigan State University Group, which built the South Vietnamese government starting in 1956, training the secret police and setting up a government that would empower a 3.5% Catholic minority to put a stranglehold on a 96.5% Buddhist country.
Wow, this is fascinating. Wesley Fishel was the Vicky Noodleman of Vietnam, so to speak.
Very much so. When General Westmoreland took over as commander in 1965 in Vietnam, he moved into what was Fishel's compound, and that became the Westmoreland compound. It was a palatial French colonial facility, their colonial governmental facility, of attractive villas, apartments, gaslit streets, bordellos, swimming pools, and fine restaurants, which became the puzzle palace of the South. There was a similar one on Da Nang near Monkey Mountain called 3MAF Marine Expeditionary Force headquarters. That was where those who ran I-Corps, the northern part of the war, lived in unbelievable luxury with the finest chefs, the best food in the world, and supervised the war, the hundreds of them, along with the press corps, behind the walls out of mortar and artillery reach on a peninsula where as many as 40,000 troops stood between them and the few hundred half-armed Viet Cong that were trying to throw the Americans out of the country.
Another green zone.
Yeah, another green zone. I spent 2 weeks in that green zone after, in September '69, I was operating with the Korean Marine Corps Blue Dragon Regiment. We landed about 25 miles south of the city of Hoi An in what appeared to be the playground of the North Vietnamese Army. And at the end of a couple of weeks of walking around there, those of us that survived were sent to man the machine gun towers around the green zone while we waited for replacements. So we would have large enough squads to be sent back into combat. A Marine squad is supposed to be 12 men. We were down to 3. They got us up to 5 and sent us back out, but I spent 2 weeks of going in the middle of the night for lunch and having a prime rib, a lobster tail, and a few croissants.
That's what they call the young women there, croissants? That's very good.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I was sitting on there was a 50 cal gun tower on the gate to 3MAF headquarters. And the only time I ever had to actually put a round in the chamber, and it's an open, it's an open chamber fired weapon, the Browning, I think it's the M2. But the U.S. Special Forces used to bring, we called them the skivvy girls, into the base to service the officers, usually 12, 13, 14-year-olds. And they had a truck of girls they'd collected from villages with green berets, escorting them in to serve the bordellos where, the congressmen would come for their junkets there. They'd land in Da Nang, take out, and a group of South Vietnamese army got pissed at this because they thought it was an affront to their nation, and got into a shooting match in front of the gate. And a good percentage of the combat in Vietnam was between South Vietnamese military, who really only ever wanted to shoot Americans whenever they could, because they hated us, and the special forces, and my good buddy Jim Hankey was one of them, who were these guys lived as well as they could. And frankly, if I'd had, not to criticize Jimmy, but if I could have gotten away with all the crap he got away with, I would have done it myself. But these were, that's the whole point. It's the survival of the fittest. In this case, the fittest are the people that can stay away from the shooting as much as possible, make the most money they possibly can, and never sleep alone if they don't have to. And in Vietnam, the Ollie North types, I remember we used to get officers that would come out with the combat units occasionally. I remember we had a West Pointer show out. I was with 1st Battalion, 26 Marines, Alpha Company, 2nd Platoon, 2nd Squad, for people who like such detail. But we had a Naval Academy guy come out.
We got 2 minutes. What was he doing out there? He didn't have to go out there.
Well, what it is, he wanted to go on a patrol because he had to be a combat vet. So he came out to his fire patrol base, fire base 6 shooter just outside Da Nang, and he wanted to go on patrol. So just outside the gate was a small village where people sold us stuff, So he got with a patrol, walked out to the village. I'm saying about 150 meters, where people had stands set up to sell you Cokes and whatever, and then he walked back. And won a silver star for that engagement.
I should say.
Yeah.
I should say. Gosh, this is a catch-22, Richard Heller all over again.
Yeah, that's and it's all still going on and will keep going on.
Yeah, well,
because inside Syria's East Ghouta, the residential neighborhoods and schools and hospitals of Damascus are being shelled by terrorists. The ones helping them aim are Israelis and U.S. Special Forces, will be, as the Syrian Arab Army closes in, will be taken out in the middle of the night in stealth helicopters.
They always are. Gordy,
they
we're out
always
of time.
are.
That was an astonishing survey of last century's history, is what it was. That was remarkable. Thank you. That was a tour de force, as they say.
We always have fun, Jeff. That's what it's about.
It's all about truth and education and reality. Thank you, Gordy. Take care. Talk soon. Be well.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, good night. Mr. Gordon Duff, Veterans Today, VT, and that was quite an hour. That's real history.